After 6 years in the Middle East building fortresses for generals, I came home to build a life with my daughter, Sarah. I expected hugs and tears of joy. I expected to see the architect I raised standing tall in the doorway of the Victorian mansion I bought for her. I did not expect to find a broken woman on her knees in a maid uniform scrubbing the floor of her own house. And when I reached out to touch her shoulder, she flinched and called me sir. That was the moment I realized I had not returned to a home. I had walked into a crime scene. Before I tell you how I tore their world apart brick by brick, let me know in the comments if you have ever had to fight for someone who could not fight for themselves. Hit like and subscribe if you believe justice is a dish best served cold. My name is Rexford Dalton, and I am 71 years old. Most men my age are worrying about their golf handicap or their blood pressure medication. I was worrying about how much structural damage a family could sustain before it collapsed completely. The taxi ride from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport felt like it took a lifetime. The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless gray drumbeat that matched the rhythm of my heart. I had been away too long. 6 years of consulting on infrastructure projects in conflict zones where the sand gets into your soul and the heat melts your patience. I told myself I was doing it for Sarah. I told myself I was securing her future, amassing a fortune so she would never have to work a day in her life unless she wanted to. But as the taxi wound its way up the private drive of the Queen Anne estate, I realized the truth. I had been running away from the memory of my wife's funeral, running away from the silence of an empty house. I paid the driver and stood in the rain staring up at the house. It was magnificent. The slate roof gleamed wet and dark. The brickwork was impeccable. I had transferred the deed to Sarah 5 years ago, a wedding gift when she married Blake Anderson. A real estate developer, she said. A man with vision, she said. I had my doubts, but I was 5,000 miles away, and her voice sounded happy on the phone. I wanted her to be happy. I walked up the stone steps, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. I did not ring the bell. I still had my key, the heavy brass key Sarah had mailed me years ago, saying this would always be my home too. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to see her face light up before she could compose herself. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The foyer was warm and smelled of lemon polish and expensive lilies. Crystal chandeliers cast a prism of light across the marble floors. It was silent. Too silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of a held breath. I walked toward the living room, expecting to see Sarah at her drafting table, or perhaps entertaining guests. Instead, I saw a figure huddled near the fireplace. A woman. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing a spot on the hardwood floor with a frantic intensity. She wore a gray uniform, the kind you see in old movies or high-end hotels. A white apron was tied around her waist. It was filthy, stained with grease and cleaning fluids. "Excuse me," I said, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. "I am looking for Sarah Anderson." The woman froze. Her shoulders hunched up as if expecting a blow. She turned her head slowly, and the air left my lungs. It was Sarah. But it was not my Sarah. My Sarah had bright eyes and a spine of steel. This woman looked 20 years older than her 34 years. Her hair was chopped short and uneven. Her skin was sallow, stretched tight over her cheekbones. And her eyes. There was no light in them, only a dull, terrified haze. "Sarah," I whispered, dropping my bag. "It is me. It is Dad." She did not smile. She did not rush to me. She scrambled backwards, scuttling across the floor like a frightened animal until her back hit the sofa. She held the scrub brush up like a shield. "Please, sir," she stammered, her voice raspy and broken. "I am hurrying. The spot is almost gone. Please do not tell Mr. Anderson. I will lose my credits for the day. I will not eat. Please, sir." I took a step forward, my hands shaking. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" Look at me. It is your father. I am home. She blinked rapidly, trying to process the information, but the wall of fear was too thick. She looked at my boots. You are wearing shoes on the floor, she whispered, horrified. Mr. Anderson forbids shoes. You are making it dirty. I have to clean it. I have to clean it before he sees. She lunged forward not to hug me, but to wipe the non-existent mud from my boots with her apron. I grabbed her wrists. They were thin as twigs. And then I saw them. Bruises. Old yellow ones and fresh purple ones blooming like dark flowers up her forearms. My combat instincts flared hot and violent. Someone had put their hands on my daughter. Someone had turned my brilliant architect into a trembling servant in her own home. Who did this? I growled, the sound rumbling deep in my chest. Sarah, who did this to you? Before she could answer, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping came from the grand staircase. I looked up. Descending the stairs was a man in a bespoke navy suit. He looked impeccable. Every hair was in place. He wore a smile that did not reach his eyes. Beside him was a woman I did not know. Younger, sharp features. She wore a silk blouse and held a clipboard, looking at me with the disdain one reserves for a stray dog. Blake Anderson, I said. My voice was calm, but it was the calm before a mortar strike. Rexford seeing you here is a surprise, Blake said, continuing his descent. We did not expect you for another week. Or perhaps never. The reports said the situation in the region was volatile. I released Sarah's hands gently and stood to my full height. I am 6'2" and I have built bridges under sniper fire. I do not shrink before men in Italian suits. What is this, Blake? Why is my daughter wearing a maid uniform? Why is she terrified of me? Blake sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He reached the bottom of the stairs and brushed a speck of lint from his lapel. It is complicated, Rex. Sarah has been unwell. Very unwell. Since you abandoned her to chase money in the desert, her mind has fractured. We are trying a new therapy. Occupational therapy. Routine. Structure. Hard work to ground her in reality. Therapy, I spat, pointing at Sarah, who had curled into a ball on the floor. You call beating her therapy. You call treating her like a slave therapy. I took a step toward him, my fists clenching. I was going to break his jaw. I was going to tear that smug smile off his face. But before I could close the distance, two men stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. They were big, thick-necked private security types. They blocked my path, their hands resting near their waists, suggesting concealed weapons. Careful, Rex, Blake said, his voice dropping an octave. You are a guest. An uninvited guest. Do not make me call the authorities. A violent old man with a history of PTSD attacking a respected businessman. It would not look good on the news. I looked at the bodyguards, then back at Blake. I assessed the tactical situation. 2 hostiles, 1 primary target. I could take them. But Sarah was right there. If a fight broke out, she would be collateral damage. I forced my muscles to relax. I needed intel before I launched an offensive. She does not recognize me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Dissociative amnesia, Blake said smoothly. A side effect of her condition. And the medication. Monica here manages her daily regimen. The woman with the clipboard stepped forward. She looked at Sarah with cold, clinical eyes. Subject 894, get up, Monica commanded. You are disturbing the guest. Go to your quarters. Sarah scrambled to her feet instantly. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. She did not look at me. She kept her head bowed and hurried toward a door that led to the basement. Sarah, wait, I called out. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. She trembled but did not turn around. Go, Blake barked. Sarah vanished behind the door. The click of the lock was the loudest sound in the room. I turned back to Blake. My rage was a cold knot in my stomach. You are living in her house, spending her money and treating her like a prisoner. You think I will let this stand? Blake laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Her house. Her money. Oh, Rex, you really have been out of the loop, haven't you? Sarah signed everything over to me 3 years ago. When her episode started, she realized she was unfit to manage the estate. She gave me power of attorney. She gave me the company. She gave me everything to protect it from herself. He walked over to a wet bar and poured himself a glass of amber liquid. He did not offer me one. As for you taking her, Blake continued, taking a sip. You are welcome to try. But you should know she is under a court-ordered conservatorship. If you try to remove her, it is kidnapping. And frankly, Rex, she is a liability. Last month, she set fire to the garage, caused $100,000 in damages. She owes the estate. She is working off her debt. Debt, I repeated incredulously. She is your wife. She is an employee, Blake corrected. An employee who is currently failing to meet her performance targets. He set the glass down and looked at me with a predatory glint. Look, I am not a monster. You are her father. You can stay the night. We have a guest room prepared. Spend some time with her. See for yourself how far she has fallen. Maybe then you will understand why I had to take control. He was baiting me. He wanted me to explode. He wanted me to give him a reason to call the police and have me arrested. He knew that if I was in a cell, I could not help Sarah. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I had to be smart. I had to be the engineer, not the soldier. I needed to find the cracks in his foundation. Fine, I said. I will stay. Monica smirked. I will show you to your room. Do not wander around at night, Mr. Dalton. The security system is very sensitive. It might mistake you for an intruder. I followed her up the grand staircase, the same stairs my daughter should have been walking down as a queen. Instead, she was in the basement, and I was being led to a cage. The guest room was luxurious. King-sized bed, silk curtains, a view of the Space Needle in the distance. But as soon as the door closed, I began my sweep. I checked the smoke detector, camera, I checked the vent, microphone, I checked the window. It was locked and reinforced with security film. This was not a guest room. It was a holding cell with high thread count sheets. I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. The image of Sarah on her knees burned behind my eyelids. The bruises, the fear. They had broken her. They had spent years dismantling her spirit, while I was thousands of miles away thinking I was providing for her. Guilt washed over me, a tidal wave of heavy black water. I had failed her. I had protected her from poverty, but I had left her open to predators. But guilt is a useless emotion. Guilt does not break locks. Guilt does not destroy men like Blake Anderson. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked city. Blake thought he had won. He thought I was just a tired old man with a heavy bag and a broken heart. He thought he held all the cards because he had the legal papers and the hired muscle. He was wrong. He forgot what I did for a living. I did not just build things. I specialized in controlled demolition. I knew how to bring down massive structures by identifying the weak points and placing the charges exactly where they needed to be. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old satellite model, rugged and untraceable. I had no signal in this fortress. I needed to get out. I needed to find Leonard Katz, my old lawyer, the only man in Seattle I could trust. But first, I needed to survive the night. I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, my boots still on. I stared at the camera lens hidden in the smoke detector. I knew Blake was watching. Let him watch. Let him think I was sleeping. Let him think I was defeated. Tomorrow I would start the assessment. I would find out where the money went. I would find out what drugs they were pumping into my daughter's veins. And I would find out exactly how much pressure it would take to crush Blake Anderson into dust. The house was quiet again, But now I could hear something else. Faintly through the floorboards, I heard sobbing, a low continuous sound of pure misery rising from the basement. It was the fuel I needed. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I began to plan. Step 1, secure the asset. Step 2, isolate the threat. Step 3, execute with extreme prejudice. They wanted a maid. They wanted a senile old man. They were about to get a war. The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of the desert, but it could not wash away the stain of this betrayal. That would require something stronger than water. The dining room was a theater of cruelty, disguised as a family meal. The long mahogany table, which I had imported from Italy for Sarah's 30th birthday, was set for 3. Crystal wine glasses caught the light of the chandelier. Silver cutlery gleamed on silk napkins, but there was no place setting for the owner of the house. I sat on the right side of the table, my hands resting flat on the cold wood. Blake sat at the head, looking like a king on a stolen throne. Monica sat opposite me, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick, using her knife as a mirror. The air smelled of roasted rosemary lamb and expensive cologne, but underneath it all was the stale scent of fear. The kitchen door swung open. Sarah walked in carrying a heavy silver tureen. The weight of it made her arms tremble. She had changed out of the gray uniform, but what she wore was worse. It was a black dress that was too large for her, hanging off her skeletal frame like a shroud. She did not look at me. She did not look at anyone. Her eyes were fixed on the soup tureen, as if carrying it without spilling was the most important mission of her life. "Careful now," Blake said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Do not embarrass us, Sarah. Remember what happened last time you spilled." Sarah flinched. The silver rattled against the china as she set the tureen down on the sideboard. She moved with the jerky, unnatural stiffness of someone who expects pain at any moment. I watched her hands. They were red and chapped, the hands of a scullery maid, not an architect. She picked up a ladle. "Serve the guest first," Monica commanded, not looking up from her phone. "And do not drip on the tablecloth. It is Egyptian cotton." Sarah moved to my side. I could hear her breathing. It was shallow and rapid, like a panicked bird. I smelled the harsh chemical scent of bleach clinging to her skin, masking her natural perfume of vanilla and jasmine that I remembered. She ladled the steaming bisque into my bowl. Her hand shook violently. A single drop of orange liquid landed on the rim of the plate. Sarah gasped. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a rag, instantly wiping the spot away. "I am sorry, sir," she whispered. "I am so sorry." "It is fine, Sarah," I said softly. "It is just soup." She froze at the sound of my voice. For a second her eyes flickered toward me, and I saw a ghost of recognition. A spark of the daughter who used to build pillow forts with me. But then Blake cleared his throat. It was a sharp, percussive sound that snapped the invisible tether between us. Sarah's eyes went dead again. She moved to serve Monica. Monica waited until Sarah was leaning over her. Then, with a movement so subtle I almost missed it, she shifted her elbow. She bumped Sarah's arm. The ladle tipped. Hot bisque splashed onto the table, and a few drops landed on Monica's bare wrist. "You clumsy idiot!" Monica shrieked, jumping up and knocking her chair back. "You burned me! Look what you did!" I knew she did it on purpose. I saw the malicious glint in her eyes before she screamed. But Sarah did not defend herself. She dropped the ladle and fell to her knees, pressing her forehead against the floor. "Please forgive me," she sobbed. "I am clumsy. I am stupid. Please do not lock me in the quiet room." Blake stood up, sighing theatrically. He walked over to Monica and inspected her wrist. There was not even a mark. He kissed it gently, then turned his cold gaze to Sarah. "This is what I was telling you," Rex Blake said, shaking his head. "She cannot control her motor functions. She is a danger to herself and others. We try to give her a normal evening, and she ruins it." He looked down at his wife, who was trembling on the floor. Sarah, clean it up, now. I gripped the edge of the table. The wood groaned under the pressure of my fingers. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to launch myself across the table. I wanted to drive my fork into Blake's hand. I wanted to smash Monica's face into the soup she had spilled. The violence inside me was a physical thing, a dark animal clawing at the bars of my ribcage. But I did nothing. I sat there like a statue. If I attacked them now, they would call the police. They would show the footage of Sarah's unstable behavior. They would paint me as the aggressor. I would be in jail by midnight, and Sarah would be alone with them forever. I had to endure this. I had to let the poison enter my system, so I could synthesize the antidote. Sarah scrambled to her feet. She did not grab a towel. She grabbed the napkins from our laps. She began to wipe the table, her movements frantic and desperate. She scooped the hot spilled soup into her bare hands to keep it from dripping onto the rug. The heat must have been searing, but she did not flinch. She was immune to small pains now. Disgusting. Monica sneered, sitting back down. I have lost my appetite. Blake sat down as well, ignoring Sarah, who was now crawling under the table to check for drips. He picked up his wine glass and swirled the dark red liquid. So, Rex, let us talk about the future, Blake said, as if his wife was not currently beneath his feet wiping the floor. I assume you came back because you ran out of money. The construction business in the Middle East dried up years ago. I can help you. I am generous. I can set you up in a small apartment downtown. Something quiet. Assisted living, perhaps. I looked at him. He was trying to assert dominance. He was trying to buy me off with pocket change. He had no idea he was talking to a man who had negotiated contracts with warlords. I am not here for charity, Blake, I said, keeping my voice level. I am here to see my daughter. Blake laughed. He nudged Sarah with his foot under the table. She flinched, but stayed silent. You are seeing her. This is her reality, Rex. But let us be honest. You are old. You do not understand modern finance. You bought this house with brick and mortar money. Old money. I have leveraged this asset into something much bigger. I am building an empire. Crypto, NFTs, high-yield private equity. He leaned forward, his eyes shining with the manic light of a gambler who thinks he has a system. In fact, I am closing a deal next week that will triple our net worth, Blake bragged. A major conglomerate is buying my firm. The Anderson Group will be global. And do you know what the best part is? I built it all with Sarah's inheritance. She was sitting on a gold mine, and she was too afraid to dig. I liberated that capital. He was confessing. He was so arrogant he did not even realize he was handing me the ammunition. He admitted to using her inheritance. He admitted to leverage. In my mind, I was recording every word. And what happens to Sarah when you sell? I asked, glancing down. Sarah had finished cleaning. She was kneeling beside Blake's chair, waiting for permission to leave. She goes where I go, Blake said, patting her head as if she were a retriever. She needs me. Without my guidance, she would be institutionalized. The state would take everything. I am her guardian angel. Monica giggled. She took a piece of bread and tore off a chunk. She dropped it on the floor next to Sarah. Oops, Monica said. Butterfingers. Sarah looked at the bread. She looked at Blake. Blake nodded slightly. Eat it, Sarah, Blake said softly. You worked hard cleaning that mess. You deserve a reward. I stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to that piece of bread on the Persian rug. This was not just abuse. This was dehumanization. They were breaking her connection to humanity. They wanted her to believe she was a dog, so she would never stand up like a human. Sarah hesitated. Her eyes met mine under the table. For a second, I saw the shame burning in them. She knew. Somewhere deep inside the fog of drugs and trauma, she knew this was wrong, but the fear was stronger. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the bread. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I am not hungry," I said. Blake looked up, smiling. "Suit yourself." "More lamb for me." I walked out of the dining room. I did not run. I walked with the measured pace of a man inspecting a structural failure. I heard them laughing behind me. I heard Monica make a joke about how the apple does not fall far from the tree. I walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed to calm down. I needed to think. The rage was blinding me, and I could not afford to be blind. I pulled the small burner phone from my pocket. I checked the battery. It was fully charged. I looked at the security keypad on the wall near the kitchen. It was a standard Honeywell system. I had installed similar ones in Kabul. I knew the default engineer codes. I knew how to bypass the silent alarm. But not yet. Tonight was reconnaissance. Tonight was about gathering intelligence. I went up the stairs to my prison cell of a bedroom. I did not turn on the light. I stood by the window and watched the rain streak the glass. Below me in the dining room, the monsters were feasting. They thought they had broken the Dalton family. They thought they had extinguished the fire. They were wrong. They had just poured gasoline on the embers. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I looked old. My face was lined with the geography of hard years, but my eyes were clear. The hesitation I had felt at the airport was gone. The guilt was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I would not just save Sarah. I would destroy Blake Anderson. I would dismantle his life piece by piece. I would take his money. I would take his reputation. I would take his freedom. And when he was lying in the dirt with nothing left but his expensive suit and his arrogance, I would make sure he remembered the taste of bread on the floor. I took out a small notebook from my bag. I wrote down 3 things. 1. The drugs. I needed to switch them. 2. The money. I needed to find where he was hiding it. 3. The pride. I needed a way to make him sell the house to me without knowing it was me. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I could hear the faint sound of dishes being washed in the kitchen. Sarah was still working. "Hold on, baby girl," I whispered into the darkness. "Daddy is home, and school is in session." The night dragged on. I listened to the house settle. I heard Blake and Monica come upstairs laughing. I heard their door close. I heard the silence return. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a fuse burning down. Tomorrow I would find Leonard. Tomorrow I would become the ghost in their machine. Tonight I let them sleep. It would be the last peaceful sleep they would ever have. The wind howled outside, battering the house, but the foundation held. I built this house to survive storms. I just had to get rid of the termites eating it from the inside. I waited until the digital clock on the bedside table read 3 in the morning. The house was finally silent. The aggressive rain had softened to a steady weeping against the reinforced glass. I had not slept. Sleep is a luxury for the innocent, and tonight I was neither innocent nor safe. I was an insurgent in enemy territory. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, my boots laced tight. I had spent the last 4 hours listening to the rhythm of the house, learning its breathing patterns. The central heating unit kicked on every 45 minutes with a low rumble. The security patrol car passed on the street below, every hour on the hour. Blake and Monica had stopped moving around upstairs at midnight. It was time. I moved to the door. It was locked from the outside. A simple privacy lock they thought would hold an old man. They forgot that locks are just mechanical puzzles, and I have been solving puzzles since I was a boy. I slid a thin metal shim I had fashioned from the clip of my pen between the door and the frame. I felt the latch mechanism. I applied pressure. Not force, just leverage. With a soft click, the tongue of the lock slid back. I turned the handle slowly, timing the movement with the rumble of the heating system to mask any sound. The hallway was bathed in the ghostly green glow of the emergency exit lights. I kept my back to the wall, moving through the blind spots of the cameras I had identified earlier. The floorboards were old, but I knew where the joists were. I stepped only on the solid points, moving like smoke toward the kitchen. The basement door was there, a heavy oak slab that looked more like the entrance to a dungeon than a part of a home. It was locked too. A deadbolt this time. But I had my key. The key Sarah had sent me 5 years ago. I prayed they had not changed the cylinder. I slid the brass key in. It met resistance. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wiggled it slightly, applying gentle torque. The tumblers fell into place. The lock turned. I opened the door, and the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of a neglected institution. Damp concrete, mold, stale urine, and beneath it all the sharp chemical tang of industrial disinfectant. It was the smell of despair. I descended the wooden stairs. They creaked under my weight, and I froze, counting to 10, waiting for a reaction from above. Silence. I continued down into the darkness. I pulled my penlight from my pocket and clicked it on, shielding the beam with my fingers to create a narrow, focused sliver of light. The beam cut through the gloom and landed on a scene that will haunt me until my dying day. This was not a guest suite. This was not a bedroom. It was a cell. The walls were bare concrete, weeping with moisture. There were no windows. In the corner sat a plastic bucket. In the center of the room, on a thin, soiled mattress, lay my daughter. She was curled into a fetal position, shivering beneath a single thin blanket. Her breathing was ragged, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of untreated bronchitis or worse. I moved closer, my boots making no sound on the cold cement. I knelt beside the mattress. "Sarah," I whispered. She did not stir. I shone the light on her face. Her skin was translucent, pale as paper. Her lips were cracked and dry. But it was her arms that made the bile rise in my throat. She had kicked off the blanket in her sleep, and her sleeves were pushed up. I gently took her left arm. The skin was a roadmap of abuse. There were fresh bruises, purple and yellow, blooming like rotten fruit. But amidst the bruises were small red puncture marks. Needle tracks. Not in the veins like a junkie, but in the muscle. Deltoid, bicep, thigh. I touched the injection sites. Some were inflamed, hot to the touch. They were injecting her. But with what? Blake had said she was on medication. But you do not inject legitimate medication in a basement in the middle of the night, leaving tracks like this. These were sedatives, muscle relaxants, or perhaps hallucinogens designed to keep her disoriented, to manufacture the very insanity they claimed she suffered from. I looked around the room for evidence. On a rusty metal shelf bolted to the wall, I found a clipboard. I shone my light on it. It was a ledger, a handwritten log of expenses and debts. I read the entries and my hands began to shake with a cold, murderous rage. October 14th, food and lodging, $500. October 15th, cleaning supplies, $50. October 15th, penalty for broken glass, $200. October 16th, medication dose, $1,000. At the bottom of the page was a running total. It was in the hundreds of thousands. And below that, a signature, Sarah's signature. But it was shaky, barely legible, as if her hand had been forced or she had been too drugged to hold the pen. They were charging her to live in her own prison. They were manufacturing a debt so massive she could never leave. They were building a paper trail to show a judge that she was financially irresponsible and dependent on Blake's charity. I heard a rustle from the mattress. I turned back. Sarah's eyes were open. They were wide, staring into the darkness, but seeing nothing. The pupils were blown wide, swallowing the irises. She looked straight at me, but there was no recognition. No, she whimpered, shrinking back against the wall. No more medicine. Please, Monica. My arm hurts. I will be good. I promise I will be good. Sarah. It is me, I said, keeping my voice low and soothing. It is Dad. I am not Monica. I am not Blake. She shook her head violently. You are tricking me. You always trick me. You say you are Dad, but then you use the needle that makes the spiders come. My heart shattered. Hallucinogens. They were giving her psychotropic drugs to induce visions, to make her terrified of her own shadow. No wonder she thought I was a threat. To her, reality was a shifting nightmare, where faces changed and loved ones became monsters. I reached out to touch her hand. She flinched, as if I had burned her. I signed the paper. She babbled, her words slurring. I signed the fire paper. I admitted it. I burned the garage. Blake said if I signed, he would let me sleep upstairs. But he lied. He always lies. I froze. The fire. Blake had mentioned she set fire to the garage, but here she was saying she signed a confession under duress. Did you start the fire, Sarah? I asked gently. She began to rock back and forth. Blake gave me the lighter. He put it in my hand. He said, "Hold this while I take a picture." Then he dropped the rag. The fire was so hot. He laughed. He took the picture and said, "Now I own you. If you try to leave, I will show the police. I will show them the crazy arsonist." I closed my eyes. It was a setup, a classic frame job. He staged the crime, documented her presence, and used it as blackmail. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was airtight. Unless I broke the seal. Sarah continued to mutter. He is selling the house. I heard him. He is selling the house to the Vulture Fund. He says I have to leave. He says I have to go to the state hospital, the one with the metal beds. Please do not let him send me there. I will work harder. I will scrub the floors until they bleed. Just let me stay. I grabbed her shoulders firmly, stopping her rocking. I needed her to hear me. I needed to plant a seed of truth in the garden of lies they had planted in her mind. Sarah, look at me. She blinked, trying to focus. Tears leaked from her eyes, running down her hollow cheeks. I am real. I am here. And I know about the land. Her breath hitched. The land, she whispered. Yes. The land under the house. The rights. Do you remember what we did? Before the wedding. The trust. Her brow furrowed. The fog in her mind thinning for just a second. The trust, she repeated. The box. The safety deposit box. Yes, I said, intense and urgent. You did not sign the land over to him, did you? Even with the drugs, even with the fear. You kept that secret. She nodded slowly, a child confessing a sin. He asked. He hit me and asked. I told him I lost the papers. I told him I did not know. I kept it safe, Daddy. I kept the dirt safe. I pulled her into my arms. She was stiff and cold, smelling of sickness, but she was my daughter. She had held on. Despite the torture, despite the drugs, despite the psychological warfare, she had held on to the one thing that mattered. She had protected the asset not because of its value, but because it was the one secret she shared with me. You did good. Sarah, I whispered into her hair. You did so good. Now listen to me. This is a mission. Do you remember when we played soldier? She nodded against my chest. Yes. You are under deep cover now. You are a sleeper agent. You have to pretend. You have to take their medicine, but you do not swallow it, if you can help it. You have to sign their papers, but you know they are fake. You have to hold on for 3 more days. Can you do that? 3 days, she asked, her voice trembling. 3 days. Then the cavalry arrives. I felt her relax slightly, the tension in her wire-thin frame easing. She believed me. Or maybe she just wanted to believe in a savior. I laid her back down on the mattress. I pulled the thin blanket up to her chin. I wanted to take her right then. I wanted to carry her out of this hellhole and run. But we would not get 10 miles. Blake would report a kidnapping. He had the legal guardianship. The police would stop us. They would return her to him and throw me in jail. And then he would kill her. He would overdose her and call it an accident. No. I had to play the game. I had to destroy his legal hold on her before I could remove her physically. I stood up. I took my phone out and snapped photos of the ledger. I took photos of the bucket. I took close-up photos of the needle tracks on her arms. Evidence. Cold, hard data. I looked at her one last time. She was watching me, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Sleep, soldier," I said. "I have the watch." I turned and walked back to the stairs. The climb up felt heavier than the descent. I was carrying the weight of her pain now, but it was a good weight. It was fuel. I locked the basement door behind me. I crept back through the silent kitchen. I bypassed the cameras. I shimmied the lock on my bedroom door and slipped inside. I stood in the center of the dark room, my chest heaving. I went to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was Leonard Katz. Somewhere out there were the laws that governed this country. Blake Anderson thought he could use those laws as a shield. He thought a piece of paper gave him the right to own a human being. He did not know who he was dealing with. He was a businessman. He dealt in profit and loss. I was a builder. I dealt in stress points and structural failure. I looked at the photos on my phone. The bruises. The ledger. "I am going to bankrupt you, Blake," I whispered to the glass. "I am going to take your money. I am going to take your reputation. And then, when you are standing in the wreckage of your life wondering what happened, I am going to hand you a bill for every single tear my daughter shed." The sun would be up in 3 hours. I needed to shower. I needed to shave. I needed to put on my suit and my mask of the defeated old man. The war had officially begun, and the first casualty would be Blake Anderson's arrogance. The next morning, I walked out of the Anderson estate with my head bowed low. I told the security guard at the gate that I was going to the local Veterans Affairs office to see if I could get an advance on my pension for a plane ticket back to the desert. It was a lie, of course. A lie designed to make me look pathetic and desperate. Blake watched me go from the balcony, his coffee cup in hand, looking like a feudal lord surveying a peasant. He let me leave because he believed I was defeated. He believed the night in the surveillance room had broken my spirit. He did not know that I was not retreating. I was flanking. I walked 3 blocks in the drizzling rain until I was out of sight of the cameras. Then I hailed a cab. I did not go to the VA. I went to a diner on the outskirts of the industrial district, a place called Sal's where the coffee tasted like battery acid and the windows were yellowed with grease. It was the kind of place where men went to disappear. It was also the only place Leonard Katz agreed to meet. Leonard was sitting in the back booth. He was 68 years old, but he looked like a man who had lived 3 lifetimes. He wore a rumpled trench coat and a fedora that had seen better decades. To the untrained eye, he looked like a retired accountant waiting for a bus. But I knew better. Leonard Katz was a shark who had swum in the deepest, bloodiest waters of Wall Street for 40 years. He had retired only because he got tired of winning. I slid into the booth opposite him. He did not smile. He simply pushed a mug of black coffee toward me. "You look like hell," Rex Leonard said, his voice like gravel grinding in a mixer. "I feel like hell," I replied, taking a sip. The hot, bitter liquid burned my throat, grounding me. "You got the file?" Leonard reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the Formica table between us. He tapped it with a nicotine-stained finger. I did some digging last night after you called, Leonard said. And Rex, it is worse than we thought. Your son-in-law is not just an abuser. He is a financial illusionist. A magician whose only trick is making money disappear. Tell me, I said, leaning in. Leonard opened the file. It was filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and corporate filings. He pointed to a complex diagram of shell companies. Blake Anderson is running a classic Ponzi scheme, Leonard explained. He calls it the Anderson High Yield Property Fund. He takes money from new investors, promising them 20% returns on real estate developments that do not exist. He uses that money to pay off the old investors and fund his lavish lifestyle. The cars, the suits, the parties. It is all bought with stolen money. I looked at the numbers. Millions of dollars flowing in and out. It was a house of cards built in a hurricane. But here is the problem. Leonard continued, his face grim. The stream of new investors is drying up. The market is cooling. People are asking for their money back. Blake is bleeding cash, Rex. He is desperate. He needs a massive injection of capital within the week, or the whole thing collapses, and he goes to federal prison for 20 years. That is why he is selling the house, I realized. The puzzle pieces snapping into place. Exactly, Leonard said. The Queen Anne estate is the last real asset he controls, or thinks he controls. He has a buyer lined up, a conglomerate called Apex Holdings. They offered him $4 million in cash. He needs that money to plug the hole in his fund before the auditors come next Monday. I clenched my fist under the table. He is selling my daughter's home to save his own skin. Leonard nodded. He thinks he can. He has Sarah's power of attorney. He has her signature on the deed transfer. Legally, on the surface, he looks bulletproof. If he sells that house, he disappears. He takes the money, takes Sarah, and vanishes to a country with no extradition treaty. And you never see her again. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. That was his plan. The sale was his escape hatch. We have to stop the sale, I said. No, Leonard said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. We do not stop the sale. We encourage it. In fact, we accelerate it. I looked at him confused. What are you talking about? Leonard pulled another document from the bottom of the stack. It was an old document, yellowed with age. It bore my signature and a notary stamp from 6 years ago. Do you remember this, Rex? Leonard asked softly. I looked at the title. The Sarah Dalton Irrevocable Land Trust. I remember, I said. I set it up before I left. I wanted to make sure the land stayed in the family, no matter what happened to the house. Leonard tapped the paper. This is the nuclear option. In the state of Washington, property law allows for a severance of the estate. It means the structure, the house itself, and the land it sits on can be owned by two different entities. When you bought the property, you bought the land. When you built the house, you kept the titles separate. You transferred the house deed to Sarah 5 years ago. But the land deed. He paused for effect, his eyes twinkling with malice. The land deed is held by this trust, Leonard whispered. And the trust has a very specific clause. It grants surface rights to the owner of the house only as long as the owner is a blood descendant of the Dalton line. If the house is sold to a third party, the surface rights expire immediately. I stared at him, my mind racing to catch up with his legal genius. Wait, I said. So if Blake sells the house to this Apex Holdings, then Apex Holdings buys a pile of bricks sitting on land they do not own, Leonard finished. And since they do not own the land and the surface rights expire upon sale, they would be trespassing. The trust would have the legal right to demand the immediate removal of the structure. I started to laugh. It was a dark, humorless laugh, but it felt good. You mean they would have to move the house? Or tear it down, Leonard said. Or pay the trust whatever rent we demand. which makes the house effectively worthless to any buyer who does update their due diligence. But Blake does not know this, I said. Leonard shook his head. He was too arrogant to check the original survey records. He saw the house deed and assumed it covered the dirt. He is about to sell a car without an engine. So what is the play, Leonard? The play is we become the buyer, Leonard said. I contacted my friends at the Olympus Fund. It is a shell company I use for aggressive acquisitions. We approach Blake today. We offer him $5 million, cash, $1 million more than Apex, but we demand a quick close. 48 hours, no inspection, no due diligence period, just a straight cash for keys deal. He will take it, I said. He is greedy and he is desperate. He will take the higher offer. He will. Leonard agreed, and he will sign a contract that includes a warranty of title clause. It means he guarantees he is selling us a usable property. When we reveal that he sold us a house on land he does not own, he will be in breach of contract. But not just civil breach. Because he accepted wire fraud money across state lines, it becomes federal fraud. We trap him, I said. We bury him, Leonard corrected. We buy the debt. We buy the house. And then we reveal the trust. He will owe us the $5 million back plus damages plus the fraud charges. He will be bankrupt instantly. And the best part, since he acted in bad faith, the power of attorney he holds over Sarah becomes voidable. We can petition for emergency guardianship immediately. It was perfect. It was a surgical strike. It used his own greed and haste against him. But there is one problem, Leonard said, his expression darkening. Sarah. She has to be there. She has to sign the final closing documents as the nominal owner. If she is too drugged or too unstable, the notary might refuse. Or worse, if she says something that tips him off that she knows about the trust. She knows, I said. I told her last night. I told her to hold on, to play the sleeper agent. Leonard looked at me, assessing my confidence. Can she do it, Rex? She has been psychologically tortured for years. Can she stand in a room with him and pretend to sign her life away without cracking? I thought of the needle marks on her arms. I thought of the fear in her eyes. But I also thought of the way she held the secret of the land for 6 years. She was a Dalton. We do not break. We just wait for the right moment to explode. She can do it, I said firmly. She is my daughter. Leonard nodded and closed the file. Then let us go hunting. I will make the call to Blake. You go back to the house. Play the part. Be the defeated father. Ask to say goodbye. Keep him distracted while I bait the hook. I stood up. I felt lighter than I had in years. The rain outside didn't look gloomy anymore. It looked like a cleansing flood. One more thing, Leonard said as I turned to leave. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small clear vial. What is this? I asked. Celine, Leonard said. I have a contact at the pharmacy Blake uses. If you can swap this with her next dose, she will be lucid for the signing. But you have to be careful, Rex. If he catches you... He won't catch me, I said, pocketing the vial. He is too busy looking at his bank account. I walked out of the diner and back into the gray Seattle morning. I was not just a father anymore. I was an operative. I was the inside man in the greatest heist of my life. I was going to steal my daughter back right from under the nose of the devil. And he was going to thank me for it right up until the moment the handcuffs clicked. I hailed another cab. Destination, the Anderson estate, or as I now called it, Ground Zero. The ride back was silent, but my mind was loud with calculations. I had the weapon. I had the plan. Now I just needed the courage to execute it. As the taxi wound up the hill, I saw the house looming in the distance. It looked strong, imposing, but I knew the truth. It was sitting on borrowed land, and the landlord was coming to collect. I spent the next 2 hours in a business center at the public library, turning myself into a ghost. In the world of high finance, identity is just a collection of numbers, and I had the right numbers. I logged into my secured server in Zurich. The account had been dormant for 6 years, accumulating interest and dust. I woke it up. With a few keystrokes, I moved $6 million into a shell company registered in Delaware. I named it the Olympus Distressed Asset Fund. It sounded impressive. It sounded like the kind of faceless corporate predator that eats small companies for breakfast. That was exactly what Blake Anderson admired. He did not respect justice, but he respected power. I printed the incorporation papers. I forged the digital signatures of a fictional board of directors. By noon, I had created a monster. By 1 o'clock, Leonard Katz was ready to take it for a walk. I sat in a rental car parked across the street from Blake's office building. It was a glass tower that screamed pretension. I wore an earpiece connected to the bug Leonard had slipped into his lapel pocket. I was the audience for a play I had written. Leonard walked into the lobby. He had shed the trench coat. He was wearing a charcoal Armani suit that cost more than Blake's car. He looked every inch the shark he was. He breezed past security, flashing a card that meant nothing but looked like everything. I heard the elevator ding through the earpiece, then the receptionist's voice. "Can I help you, sir?" "Mr. Katz, to see Mr. Anderson," Leonard said. His voice was no longer gravel. It was silk wrapped around steel. "I do not have an appointment. Tell him I am here from Olympus. Tell him we know about the audit committee meeting next Monday." There was a pause, the sound of typing, then a hurried whisper. "Please go right in, Mr. Katz." I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. Blake sitting behind his oversized desk, trying to look busy while his world burned down around him. The door opened. "Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, "I will not waste your time. I know you are a busy man, mostly busy trying to figure out how to fill a $4 million hole in your balance sheet before the feds show up. So, who are you?" Blake demanded. His voice was high-tight. Panic was setting in. "I am the solution," Leonard replied. "I represent the Olympus Fund. We specialize in acquiring distressed assets from distressed gentlemen. We have been watching your portfolio. We like the house. We like the land. We do not like the management." "Get out," Blake snapped. "My company is fine. The house is not for sale." "Everything is for sale," Leonard countered, "especially when the owner is facing 20 years for wire fraud." "Do not insult my intelligence, Blake. We have seen your books. You are leveraging new investor capital to pay dividends. It is a classic Ponzi. And the music is about to stop." Silence. I could hear Blake's breathing through the earpiece. It was heavy, ragged. He knew he was caught. "What do you want?" Blake asked finally, his voice dropping to a defeatist whisper. "We want the Queen Anne estate," Leonard said. "And we want the intellectual property rights to your development firm. We are willing to pay $5 million, cash." I heard the squeak of a leather chair. Blake had jumped up. $5 million. That is above market value." Leonard chuckled. A cold, dry sound. "We are paying for speed, Mr. Anderson. We need a tax write-off for this quarter. We need to close in 48 hours. No inspection, no due diligence. We take the property as is. You walk away with $5 million clean. You pay off your investors. You avoid prison. You start over in the Caymans or wherever rats like you go to hide." I gripped the steering wheel. This was the hook. The greed. Blake was doing the math in his head. $5 million would cover his debts and leave him with $1 million to run. "What is the catch?" Blake asked. "No catch," Leonard said. "Just conditions. First, we close on Friday morning. Second, the house must be vacated immediately upon signing. Third, your wife, Sarah. She is the deed holder on record. She must be present to sign. And she must be lucid. My legal team does not deal with contested signatures. If she looks drugged, if she hesitates, the deal is off, and I call the SEC on my way out." There was a long pause. I held my breath. This was the pivot point. If he refused to bring Sarah, we were dead. "She is not well," Blake said slowly. She has episodes. Fix her, Leonard said brutally. You have 2 days. Clean her up, put her in a nice dress, make sure she smiles and signs her name. After that, she is not your problem anymore. You can leave her here. We will handle the eviction. Leave her, Blake repeated. You are selling the house, Leonard said. Do you really want to drag a mental patient with you to your new life? I heard the sound of liquid being poured. Blake was drinking. He was weighing his humanity against his freedom. It was not a long contest, Fine, Blake said. Friday morning, 10 o'clock. But I want the money wire transferred to an offshore account. Standard procedure, Leonard agreed. Do we have a deal? I heard the slap of a hand hitting a hand. The deal with the devil was signed. See you Friday, Blake Leonard said. Do not disappoint me. My employers get very nasty when they are disappointed. I heard the door close. I heard the elevator ding. I let out a breath I had been holding for 10 minutes. The trap was set. The rat had taken the cheese. I watched Leonard walk out of the building. He did not look at me. He just tapped his ear once and walked away. I started the car. Now came the hard part. Blake would be going home with a new mission. He would be desperate to get Sarah ready. He would stop the heavy sedatives because he needed her awake, but he would threaten her. He would terrorize her into compliance. I had to get back to the house. I had to intercept the transition. I had to be there when he told her she was being sold. I drove back to the estate. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. I parked the rental car 3 streets away and walked back up the hill. I let myself in through the side gate using the code I had disabled the night before. I entered the house through the kitchen. It was empty. I moved to the living room. I sat in the armchair in the corner and waited. Half an hour later, Blake burst through the front door. He was manic. His face was flushed with the high of the deal. He threw his briefcase onto the sofa. "Monica," he shouted. "Monica, get down here!" Monica appeared at the top of the stairs, looking bored. "What is it, Blake? Did the audit notice come?" "Better," Blake yelled. "I sold it. I sold the whole damn thing. 5 million. Cash. We are rich, Monica. We are free." Monica ran down the stairs, her eyes wide. Who bought it?" "Some investment fund," Blake said, pouring himself a drink. "Doesn't matter. They want a quick close." "Friday. We have to pack. We are leaving for Saint-Tropez on Saturday." "What about the old man?" Monica asked, looking around. "Screw him," Blake laughed. "He can rot in a nursing home. And Sarah..." He paused, taking a long swallow of whiskey. "We have to get her ready," Blake said. "They need her to sign. Stop the injections. Give her stimulants. Caffeine. B12. Whatever it takes. She needs to look like a functioning human being for 1 hour." "And after that?" Monica asked. "After that, we leave her," Blake said. "The new owners can deal with the crazy bitch." I sat in the shadows listening to them plan the disposal of my daughter like she was a piece of broken furniture. My hand drifted to the pocket where I kept the vial of saline. I stood up. "That sounds like a wonderful plan, Blake," I said, stepping into the light. Blake jumped, spilling his drink. "Jesus, Rex, how long have you been sitting there?" "Long enough," I said, keeping my face impassive. "I heard you are selling." "Congratulations." Blake straightened his jacket, recovering his composure. "Yes, well, it is a business decision. Best for everyone. Sarah needs professional care that I can no longer provide. The proceeds from the sale will go toward securing her future." "Liar." "I understand," I said. "It must be a relief." "It is," Blake said. "Look, Rex, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but this is happening. Friday morning we sign. You should probably pack your things too." "I will be ready," I said. Blake nodded and turned to Monica. Go get Sarah. Clean her up. We start the detox protocol now. Monica went to the basement door. I watched her unlock it. I will help, I said, moving forward. She is my daughter. She trusts me. If you want her to behave, let me talk to her. Blake looked at me suspiciously. Then he shrugged. Fine. But no funny business. If she acts up on Friday, the deal dies. And if the deal dies, I swear to God, Rex, I will put her in a state facility so dark, you will never find her. I understand, I said. I want this deal to go through as much as you do. And I meant it. I wanted him to sign that contract. I wanted him to sign his own death warrant. I followed Monica down the stairs. Sarah was sitting on the mattress, hugging her knees. She looked up and saw me. Fear flashed in her eyes, then confusion. Daddy, she whispered. Mr. Anderson has good news, Sarah, I said, my voice cheerful and loud for the benefit of the microphones. We are going to have a big day on Friday. You need to get strong. Monica tossed a dress onto the bed. It was a pale blue summer dress, the one Sarah had worn on her honeymoon. Put this on, Monica ordered, and take a shower. You smell like a kennel. I stood between Monica and Sarah. I will help her up the stairs, Monica. You go start the coffee. Monica rolled her eyes and stomped back up the stairs. I turned to Sarah. I knelt down and gripped her hands. This is it, I whispered. The game is on. He is stopping the drugs. He needs you lucid. Sarah trembled. He is selling the house. Yes, I said. And we are going to let him. But the trust, Sarah whispered. The land. I put a finger to her lips. Exactly. When he signs that paper, he is committing fraud. He is walking into a trap we dug for him. But you have to be brave. You have to walk into that room on Friday and sign your name. Can you do that? Sarah looked at the dress. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were still glassy, but deep down I saw a flicker of the fire that used to burn there. I will sign, she said. I will sign his end. Good girl, I said. We spent the next 2 days in a strange purgatory. Blake was manic, bouncing between packing boxes and shredding documents. Monica was cold and efficient, stripping the house of valuables. I played the role of the submissive grandfather, making tea, helping with the boxes, keeping my head down. But every time I poured Sarah a glass of water, I slipped in the saline solution Leonard gave me, flushing the toxins from her system. Every time Blake wasn't looking, I whispered courage into her ear. By Thursday night, Sarah was changing. The tremors in her hands were lessening. Her speech was less slurred. She was waking up from a 3-year nightmare. And with the wakefulness came the pain. She remembered everything, every blow, every insult, every night in the basement. I sat with her in the guest room, which Blake had graciously allowed her to use for her final nights. I want to kill him, Dad, she whispered, her voice steady for the first time. I want to push him down the stairs. No, I said. That is too easy. Death is a release. Prison is a punishment. We want him to live a long life, knowing he had it all and lost it because he was stupid. She nodded. She trusted me. Friday morning dawned bright and cold. The sky was the color of steel. The house was spotless. The boxes were stacked by the door, ready for the movers. Blake was wearing his lucky suit. He looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie. Showtime, he said to his reflection. He turned to me. Rex, bring her down. And remember, one wrong move and I bury her. I went upstairs. Sarah was standing by the window wearing the blue dress. She had put on a little makeup covering the bruises on her cheek. She looked beautiful. She looked fragile. But she stood straight. Ready, I asked. She took a deep breath. Ready. We walked down the stairs together. Blake was waiting at the bottom. He looked at Sarah with a critical eye. "Not bad," he said. "Just keep your mouth shut and sign where I tell you. Smile at the nice man. Do not speak unless spoken to." "Yes," Sarah said. Her voice was soft, but it did not waver. The doorbell rang. It echoed through the empty house like a gong. Blake checked his watch. 10 o'clock exactly. Punctual. I like that. He walked to the door and threw it open. Leonard Katz stood there. He was not alone. Behind him were 2 other men in suits carrying briefcases. Witnesses. And behind them, parked on the street, was a black town car. "Mr. Anderson," Leonard said, stepping inside. "Shall we conclude our business?" "Please," Blake said, gesturing to the dining room table which had been cleared for the occasion. "Come in." I walked behind Sarah, my hand hovering near her back. This was the moment. The trap was sprung. All Blake had to do was step on the trigger. We sat at the table. Leonard sat opposite Blake. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "The purchase agreement," Leonard said, sliding it across the table. "The transfer of deed, the warranty of title, and the wire transfer confirmation. $5 million pending signatures." Blake's eyes widened when he saw the transfer document. He licked his lips. "Let us get this done," Blake said, picking up a pen. He signed his name with a flourish. Fast. Aggressive. He did not read a single line. He just wanted the money. "Now you, Sarah," Blake said, shoving the papers toward her. "Sign here. Here."